Super happy to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. Early start, 4 a.m. waking up, but I still got a lot of energy. Ask me again at 3 p.m. See about that when I fly back home. As Caroline said, I'm here to talk to you about inbound PR. And inbound PR is a term that I coined a couple of years ago, and last year published my book on it. So why am I here then to talk to you about it? Because I want to give you some very practical tips on how you can do inbound PR for yourself. I don't expect you to try it all, but certainly there are going to be ideas that are going to work for your business or generally for you as individuals. Now, before I get started, I want to get an understanding of how many of you are HubSpot customers. I expect everybody? Almost everybody? Almost everybody. Great. Partners? Also partners? A few of you. Thank you guys for the partnership with us. And huge thank you to Digital 22 as well for inviting me. As mentioned, I'm Global Partner Program Manager at HubSpot. What that means is that I work on strategic and programmatic changes for our partners. Our partners are extremely important network for us because they're the ones who can help our customers achieve their goals with all of our HubSpot products. So of course, our program needs to evolve, and that really is my job. And before that, I worked with over 200 of our agency partners across EMEA. I consulted them on how to use the tools, how to grow their businesses, how to deliver better services for clients. And before that, I spent 3+ years working in PR across Germany and the UK. I was based in Plymouth and Cheltenham for a certain amount of time. And that's how I managed to come up with this whole concept of inbound PR by combining my prior experience in PR agencies and my 5+ years at HubSpot as a consultant and now as a program manager. So really mastering everything there is around inbound marketing, inbound sales, etc. And as I mentioned, I just published, well, a year ago I published my book about inbound PR. You can find me everywhere online. I have a weird spelling on my name. It's Iliana. Why is that? I'm originally Bulgarian. However, I studied in Germany. I was based over here in the UK. I'm now in Ireland. I work for an American company. My boyfriend's Peruvian. I speak 4 languages, so my accent, as you can notice, is difficult to place. Now, we do have a surprise for you, for those of you that are following the Twitter from the Manchester Hug. I'm raffling a signed copy of my book, and that's for the person that tweets the most. So I hope you guys are on Twitter and like to tweet. The only requirement is that you use the hashtags InboundPR and Manchester Hug so that we can track it. And then at the end, whoever has tweeted the most will win a signed copy. And I'd love to obviously sign it with your name as well so you have a memory of this. All right, let's kick it off, shall we? Starting with a question. Can anyone take a guess where this photo is? I'll give you a tip, it's a cold country. Come on, guys, have you had coffee? Where? Nope. Nope. Greenland, close. Not exactly. 2 people are talking, everybody else is still asleep. This was in Iceland about 3 years ago, in the middle of the national park in their so-called Silfra Lake. And this lake is famous in the world, right? And that's me on the picture. And why do I have this whole saying over there, fear only holds us back? I think that relates to us as individuals, as professionals, as businesses as well. I can't swim. And my friends dragged me to a lake to go snorkeling early January, snow and freezing everywhere. The water was 2 degrees. And they wanted me to go there and experience this whole thing. I was terrified as we were on the way there because, as I said, I really thought I was going to drown. Luckily, they had like all these suits, so you were just floating up there. But this whole thing ended up being one of the best experiences of my life. Why? Because you're snorkeling, or you can go diving if you have a cert. Obviously, I don't. And you see 2 continents. So you see the North American and the Eurasian continent. And if you dive there, you can actually touch them like that with your hands, which is a terrific experience. I've never seen water as clear as that. The lake is only 40 meters deep where you can see the continents and everything, but literally from just up there, you could see it all. And so for me, this really, really scary experience in the beginning where I couldn't really, not was a swimmer, turned out to be something that I can tell a story every day from then on. And fear really is something that holds us back. A lot of us don't want to take risks. A lot of us are scared of change. A lot of us are scared of new things. And really, we should be overcoming that because it only gives us opportunities and new experiences to learn and to be able to talk about. And that's what inbound PR is all about. When I wrote the book, that was one of its premises. When I came up with the whole concept of inbound PR was with the idea to change a whole industry. Because PR has been rooted in conventional ways of thinking and doing the work that it's been doing, and there is a better way to do it. Does anyone work in PR here? You're all inbound marketers then? Marketing, everybody? Nodding heads? Okay, well then hopefully you'll learn something new about a new industry that'll give you ideas of some things that you can try. And there's a reason why the word inbound is there. For you guys as a marketers, it's probably gonna be easier to apply all of this than it is to PR people. So we're going to get started with why I believe PR needs to transform as an industry. I'll spend a bit of time talking about how I think inbound can help with all of that. And in the end, we're going to focus a lot on the how to do inbound PR. That's going to give you super helpful tips, I hope, that you can guys go ahead and try out. And you'll be familiar with a lot of that since you've all been doing inbound marketing already. So why is PR broken? When we look at defining an industry, we always look at the definition, right, in the textbooks. So this is the globally accepted definition of PR, comes from the PRSA, the global PR body based in the States for PR, and they say that PR is a strategic communication process that builds mutually beneficial relationships between organizations and their publics. Hands up, who gets this? 3 people. I might quiz you on that later. Here's another one. Advertising is saying that you're good, and PR is getting other people to say that you're good. Does that make a little bit more sense, yeah? Would you agree with that? That doesn't come from a PR pro, which is funny. Another question. How many of you think that the only thing that PR do is media relations? Media relations is basically working with journalists to get coverage out in that type of outlets, newspapers, magazines. Who agrees? Nobody? Everybody? Laughing? Hands up? Stand up? There's no energy in the room. Well, that's outdated, right? Like, that's no longer the case. Why? With different media types nowadays. Have you guys heard of the PESO model? Paid, earned, shared, and owned? I bet you have. So the media has changed, right? Like, we have influencers, and I think the biggest shift that's happened over the years that inbound marketing pushes so much is the fact that we, as buyers, basically have the power. We are sophisticated, we have social media, we have the internet, brands have little to say to that. And so PR, too, needs to evolve, and there are a lot of PR people and great PR agencies who have evolved and are doing things across the media types that are out there. However, there's still this big notion with the traditional way of doing PR, which is creating a press release, mass emailing it to 500 journalists, hoping for 5 pieces of coverage. That is, unfortunately, still the mass way that PR gets done. But it's interruptive, right? It's not inbound, it's outbound. Journalists is just as buyers. They don't like to be interrupted. They like to have a good experience with you, no matter what type of professional you are. So really, the way to do it better, in my opinion, is to adopt a different approach. And funny enough, like a lot of people from the industry itself agree with it. However, the industry has been notoriously known for taking too long to adopt. And I do feel that inbound can help, because inbound has a very different feel to doing it, very different philosophy that I know you guys are all aware of. But when I started thinking about this, when the whole idea was born, there were 2 things that stood out to me as to why inbound can help PR. The first one that I realized was that PR people are really good at content, right? And inbound is all about content. You guys all know that. PR people are storytellers at heart. That's what they study, that's what they do day in and day out, right? Like, they take a tiny, tiny idea and turn it into a whole news piece. And you can see that that's what the majority of PR people do. The Chartered Institute of PR, this was last year's survey over here, say that most of PR people basically spend their time copywriting or editing, so really dealing with written content. However, the second thing that I noticed was that PR people are really, really, really bad when it comes to measuring things. And as you know, inbound marketing is all about the numbers, right? Like you start with the numbers in mind, and then you close the loop with all of that. It was very easy to understand it when we had the funnel, but we are now trying to kill it with the flywheel. However, all of it starts with numbers that you should be able to track with the technology and the software that you're using. Generally, PR people are slow at that, and they're not adopting a lot of tools very easily. And there's some data to prove it. Consistently, every research that you look into when it comes to PR, the biggest challenge for PR professionals is measuring the results of their activities. And you see that a lot of them still use the so-called AVEs, advertising value equivalents, which is basically taking the size of an advertisement, say in a magazine, and thinking about how much that costs, and then relating that to, if that were an editorial piece, how much, and just comparing the price that way, which is really, doesn't tell you anything about the actual return on investment. So these two things, if we combine them then, if we think about inbound marketing's challenge, because I've seen a lot of marketing struggle with content creation. How many of you struggle with content creation? 2 of you? Wow, good job. Anyway, that's been my experience for my consulting years. And then I've seen that marketing is generally a lot better when it comes to numbers and measurement, which unfortunately is not what PR is great at. So that's how inbound PR was born. I started blogging, I started writing about it, people started sharing and commenting and really sharing feedback that it does work, it does make sense. So after 2 years of blogging, I pitched Wiley, one of the largest publishing houses in the world, and they accepted my pitch for a whole book, which then centered around this whole methodology of inbound PR, which I think you guys will find very similar to the inbound marketing methodology, because we still have the same stages in the flywheel now, not the funnel, around attracting, engaging, and delighting. And then we make use of different tools, especially when it comes to attracting. It's all about content, right? Engaging, we get into mail and bots and everything. Delighting is still stuff that you guys are aware of, but especially around driving relationships. Now, there's one thing that's very key about PR that no other industry can do. And PR can tackle many different stakeholders. If you have a good PR person at hand, they can work to tackle your buyer persona, they can work to tackle your media persona, as I'll show later on, they can work with your employees, with your investors, etc. So PR is unique in the sense that as an industry, it can work with a lot of stakeholders. And this methodology can be applied to any stakeholder. Generally, all the steps that I'm going to show you in a second can be applied to any stakeholder. You just have to be very clear about it. How do we do it? There are 8 steps, and we're going to go through all of them in a little bit. And this is going to help you set up an inbound PR strategy, help you set up your first campaign, or just generally give you ideas of some things that you can try out, or some best practices that I've defined over the years working with a lot of companies from different sizes, and then my background in PR as well. So number 1, setting your goals. I think everyone is aware of that, and everybody knows that we need to be doing it, but particularly with PR, it's very prevalent. Why? Because when it comes to PR, and often when it comes to marketing, our goals become very high level, and we need to dig deeper, right? We need to know, why are we doing this? I typically like to advise my clients to ask why 5 times at least to get really to the bottom of it, right? You need to know what exactly you're trying to achieve, and especially when it comes to PR, you need to have an understanding of how much you expect that investment, PR, to bring you back. And that's where PR people really are not so good at. Because that's the step that they forget, because it is tough to measure influence, it is tough to measure coverage, especially when it comes to how you're going to contribute, what does it contribute with regards to sales. But that's the number 1 step you have to do. Once you have your goals clear, and once you know which stakeholder persona PR is going to tackle for me, then you're going to have to define your stakeholder personas. And those personas, you're familiar with buyer personas, or obviously buyer personas are your ideal customers. But if you flip that to more of a media relations type of work, that PR people still do a lot, you could have the media persona. Those are your journalists, those are your influencers, generally anybody who's an intermediary to placing your story in their publication. And the same process you use when it comes to defining buyer personas, ideally that's what you're going to do when it comes to journalists or any other influencer out there. And it starts with doing your research. A lot of my customers back in the day would rely on assumptions when it comes to buyer persona definitions, right? Like you come up with a list of questions you want to ask, you sit down and you start brainstorming and discussing, and you're like, okay, great, we have a buyer persona. However, very few go out and actually survey them or have focus group, interview them, etc. If you really want to know your stakeholders, you're going to have to go and talk to them. And granted, the first step is really asking those questions, right? But once you have the list of those people that you believe would be interested in your business, you're going to have to go dig deeper. So I have two things here to show you just as a couple of examples, right? With the buyer persona, typical questions that you guys are familiar with, and then the media persona, right? You really need to know who are those journalists or bloggers, YouTubers that could be interested in your business. You want to know what's a day in their life. You want to know how they prefer to be contacted. I run my own blog, so I get pitches at least a couple of times a week. And oftentimes those pitches come on my email with like really large text pieces, which I just ignore. However, if someone sends me a Twitter message with a short pitch, I'll probably pay attention to that. And then I'll tell them, this is how you can actually reach me so that I can pay attention to you. And to find that out, you guys just have to do your research. Also, the journalists, they too do research, right? When they come up with their stories, most of them use social media or also Google. Now, you need to be creating content specifically designed for them so that you appear in those search results, whether they're on social or on Google. Typically, media people are also looking for certain things for their stories. Some of them might be looking for facts, others might be looking for interviews. You need to be aware of what is it that interests them and what's important to their publication as well. And then again, you also want to know what type of challenges they're facing. For some of the publications, they might have very quick turnaround time, right? Like only 24 hours to come up and publish a story. So can you be just as agile? But this is super important, and I just read a research the other day with regards to the media report done by Cision for this year. And I believe the number was that 75% of pitches that journalists receive are irrelevant to them. And that if there was one thing that PR people could do better to work with them was to really understand who the journalists are, what the publication is all about, and who are the readers of that publication. Hence why this research is so important to you guys as well. Because otherwise, if you're pitching, your pitch is just going to get ignored. The second piece of the research is your stakeholder journey. Similar to the buyer persona journey, journalists too are going through a decision-making process, essentially, right? With the buyer persona, they usually have a problem, they start researching solutions, they decide where they're going to buy. Same thing with journalists, right? Like they know they have to write a story, then they start researching ideas and companies, and then at the end, they pick those brands or those influencers to work with. You have to understand that whole decision-making process, and that only happens by talking to the media people that are of interest to you. These two pieces, when it comes to your persona and their stakeholder journey, will then enable you to create a content plan. Content plan is super important. Obviously, inbound marketing doesn't work without content, so does PR. However, for that content to work and for you to be top of mind and to appear in those search results of the media people, you have to be very mindful of it. And there's a reason why I started with buyer persona and buyer journey or stakeholder journey. Lots of people do content creation the other way around. They come up with loads of ideas on, okay, these are cool blog posts and topics that we can run. And in fairness, I fall into that trap myself as well, just because of lack of time. But if you want to do this right, you're going to have to be strategic. So you're really starting with your persona, and for each persona, you're going to have different content pieces, right? And yeah, you may repurpose, that's totally fine, but you're going to have to be very targeted as to how and who you're creating that content for. We've obviously got certain questions that these people are asking at the different stages of their decision-making journey, and turn those into your keywords, into your pillar pages, etc. You want to make sure you have the right content offers, and then you're using your blog posts, your press releases, your newsroom, like all these kind of pieces to promote that content. That's the whole idea. Because at the end of the day, if you want to tie in results and prove ROI, you're going to have to look at what type of content is generating the best leads for me. And once you do all of that, obviously the next step is to get it out there. Oh yeah, and just want to say too that content format is important. I looked at that research recently and thought that could be an easy thing for you guys to just take a quick snap of, especially when it comes to B2C, and then B2B as well. How many of you do video marketing? A few of you? That's good, almost half the room. Well, you're gonna have to ramp that up because they say that next year, that's just next year, which is 6 months away, 80% of online traffic is gonna be video, which is pretty crazy. All right, so then we're coming into content promotion. I think content promotion has become really, really hard because there's just so much out there. There's too much information, everybody's sharing stuff. It's like all over the place. There's so many content, there's so many social networks out there. It's really, really, really hard to be top of mind and to reach your audience, hence why that research is so important. And as you can see here too, over 55% of the global population already has internet access, which is still a lot. There's a ton of stuff going on in a minute in the internet. And on average, people have 8.5 social media accounts. I have 10. Anybody else with a 10 accounts? 10 social media accounts? You counting in your head? One person? 9? 8 accounts? 7 accounts? You guys are not on social? 6 accounts? Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I think I'm not looking, but some of you didn't raise your hands. All right, so through my work with a lot of customers, I've also tested this, and I found that, in my opinion, this is kind of like the formula that works really well when it comes to content success. And it's not just about new content. I think we get bogged down with that a lot, thinking that we need something new, we need something new, we need something new. That's not always the case. Granted, fresh content is important, and it is important for Google. However, I don't think we spend enough time when it comes to sharing content distribution already for content success. Nor do we do enough repurposing. And this is one of the charts, comes from an agency called Spinstocks over in Chicago, in the States. And I think this is a great, great model when it comes to distribution and giving you ideas around how can I spread my content or how can I repurpose it, right? Like you want to be playing with all of the media types, especially when it comes to content distribution and then also repurposing of the content. Lots of your blog posts, you can turn them into ebooks, or you can turn a blog post into infographic or videos, etc., etc. You're gonna have to play with that, guys, if you want to spread your message out there, because at the end of the day, as a company, you probably don't have a million messages and able to create a new message again and again and again and again. You need to spend more time on distribution. And two, one of the pieces of the model here obviously is earned media, right? Like that's the whole work with the intermediary, the media people, the journalists, the influencers, etc. So through my work in a lot of conversations with journalists, I found that the approach that PR people take when it comes to working with them is, as we said, very outbound, right? Like they just receive a lot of emails, and most of them, they spam them. It just doesn't work for them. It's not personalized. And that's the type of approach that media people want. And so a lot of these tips that you can see here, in one shape or form, we'll discuss them because it all begins with your research and ensuring that you know who you're trying to reach. Just as you're trying to understand your buyers and how to reach them, it's the exact same approach you need to apply when it comes to journalists and influencers. You also want to understand how they want to be reached out, right? Like as I said, I think I read a couple of years ago that a journalist receives around 1,092 press releases a day. Like that's not possible to get through, right? And so probably email is not always the best vehicle to reach out to them. There'll be other ways you can do it, and certainly there might be other ways you can do it, not just with press releases, right? I've tested, for example, quick Loom videos instead of a press release text, and that's worked quite well with some journalists, with others it hasn't. Hence why you need to get to know them really well. And it goes back to creating really, really good content, because even if you're pitching a press release, for example, to them, and they do read it and they get interested in it, first thing they're going to do, they're going to click on your website and they're going to vet you there. They're going to look into what are the things you're publishing, are you active online, etc., etc. So you want to make sure that you have a good presence on your website, because they will come and check you out just as buyers do. How many of you have a PR contact on your webpage or contacts page? It's really hard for journalists to get in touch with you if they don't know who to email, and when they see a blank form on your website, they don't know where that's going to land, and oftentimes that just puts them off, and they just don't want to reach out. So it's definitely something for you guys to consider, especially if you have a PR person at hand. And at the end, you do want to make sure that, you've been more approachable to them, you share their content, you are building a relationship, even though they may not publish the first time around about you, maybe they'll do that later on, but you do want to engage with the stuff that they're writing and sharing, because a journalist is there to build a relationship and engage their readership, so the more you help them do that, the better friends you can become with them. And there's another thing too that you can try and test, and it's a newsroom. I did a lot of research on newsrooms when I was writing my book, and what I found was that a newsroom is more or less the reserved thing for larger companies, right? There's a B2C example here with Coca-Cola and another one with Cisco. Cisco have a really good newsroom, by the way. And in fairness, I believe that especially for those of you who want to do PR and a lot of PR, a newsroom could be a really, really helpful thing. Why? Because it's a go-to resource for your media people. The same way that you guys have a downloads page on your website for your buyers, that's exactly the same purpose that a media newsroom serves, because it has everything a journalist needs. And oftentimes for journalists, it's really hard to find the resources they want. And it's something as well that saves you time, saves them time. They might actually find interesting things that they can go ahead and write about without even having to talk to you, without you having to pitch to them. One example too of something that journalists need, again from the research that I read the other day, a lot of journalists lack good visual materials and keep on chasing clients for that. And you can easily place that on a newsroom. And I'll let you take a quick snap here as well. That's one of the most popular slides of this presentation. It's around the newsroom. And the real newsroom needs these key things to be really effective. So obviously your press releases, your recent coverage, research you might have, studies, guest posts, visuals, as I said, information about your products, your executives, interviews with them, podcast webinars, like generate content you create, and that's especially developed for the media, even better. Any events coming up, investor financial relationships, information if available for you guys, contact details, and then two, really important, a search and sort function from the start. Now, if you want to build a newsroom, the first thing you should do is really create a proper architecture of it. Why? Because at the beginning you may have little information to put on it, but later on, as that starts to grow and grow and grow, it's going to become really difficult to search and sort it. And you want to make it super easy for whoever comes to it to find what they need. So from the start, I do advise you to spend a bit of time designing it. Just as you spend time designing your website, that's a space there that you should spend time and strategically put together with a good architecture. So once you have all of these things together, right, like we've gone through defining who your personas are, what the decision-making journey they come from, through what type of content you should be creating, you've put that out, you're starting to share it, etc. You're already generating some contacts, especially some media contacts. Lead nurturing can be applied to any stakeholder persona, as long as you have these other pieces there. Because we often advise that lead nurturing should be done through the stages of the buyer's journey and all that kind of good stuff. So this can save a lot of time when it comes to engagement, especially when you're trying to build relationships. And we know how we're all strapped for time. So this is the way, this is the part where you can be using a little bit more automation once you've done all the research and once you're doing things the right way. And the last step, obviously, is around closing the loop. We started with the goals. We want to see, are we achieving those, right? Like, we want to measure all of that. And then it all goes back to this point around measuring outcomes rather than inputs. That's something that PR people are notoriously famous for. You really want to know what you're getting out of it. And this is a screenshot of a really cool framework called Evaluation Framework by Amic. It's an online tool. I think it actually helps create an entire campaign. And it's a really nice way that just guides you, ask you a lot of questions, and you can define at the end of the day what type of outputs you're hoping to achieve. And in fairness, it's all about the data, right? It's all there. You have the HubSpot tools as well as HubSpot customers. There's nothing better than that. It's a whole CRM. At the end of the day, media relations is about managing relationships with journalists and managing those contacts. So you have to start with the numbers in mind and then use the software to enable you to do work and to help you measure the results. quick recap. If you want to put an inbound PR strategy in place or run your first inbound PR campaign, you need to start with your goals. Once you know what you want to achieve, you need to decide which stakeholder personas are we going to tackle. Having those, you're going to have to do some research and define them, making sure that you understand the decision-making journey. Once you have all these things and the questions that they ask, then you can focus on creating the right content for them. You need to spread that content. Media relations can be a part of that. Lead nurturing can help you there as well. And then at the end, you're going to have to close the loop, measure the results, see where you did well, where you didn't, what are some things we can kill. I think we end up adding more and more and more and more, and sometimes we just don't kill things that don't work, which we should sometimes focus on. So finally, I believe that PR does require a new approach, and I think inbound is the way to get there, and because it allows you to create measurable and then remarkable results. And finally, there are 8 steps that are important for you when it comes to defining an inbound PR strategy and also putting it to place with your first campaigns. That's it. Thank you very much.
Okay.